Hi, and welcome to Rontime. Here we are once again. It's March 21st, first day the U of A played in the NCAA tournament in San Diego, where they beat Weber State from northern Utah. Interesting, today I was standing outside and I saw two women on bicycles. And turns out they're actually Mormon missionaries on a mission here in Tucson. And they ride bicycles just like the guys do. They were interesting to talk to because it's the very first time I've ever seen a Mormon woman on a mission. And they were remarking that it's considerably warmer down here in Tucson, Arizona than in Utah where they live. So they were surprised. They were not surprised to learn that Weber State lost to Arizona in the first game of the championships today because they were actually in favor of Utah State rather than Weber State. So, what a day. So here we are. March Madness. March Madness seems to affect the legislature just as much as it affects anybody else. There's a senator named Yee in Arizona State Senate who's trying to block the hearing of a bill that would clarify how studies on cannabis at university campuses in the state of Arizona would be funded. The researchers, including Dr. Sisley here at the University of Arizona, were anticipating and rightfully so, expecting that their resources should have come from the sales of medicinal cannabis in the state of Arizona, which has been generating taxes, as well as the income tax from the dispensaries that sell. However, in her great wisdom, Senator Yee would prefer that that money be spent teaching youth about the dangers of recreational cannabis. And it's interesting because when you look at the way studies on cannabis have been sequestered and snubbed and shunted in the past, there is a very limited scientific knowledge about cannabis. That research was generated in the United States of America because the DEA has continually suppressed any studies done. They don't want to admit that they're playing cops and robbers is a very profitable game for that particular segment of the federal government of the United States, and they're not willing to let go of power or control over that many people and that much money. And so they have again and again suppressed studies that demonstrate clearly that cannabinoid oils kill all three forms of breast cancer in the body without any harmful side effects and without the damage that goes along with current treatments such as radiation and or chemotherapy. Interestingly enough, if Senator Yee would raise her head above the cloud a little bit, she could see that Washington State and the state of Colorado are both realizing larger than expected tax revenues from their legalization of recreational marijuana, and that both teams were in the Super Bowl this year. So kind of lends a new meaning to the word Super Bowl. So it's interesting. I don't mean to personally criticize Senator Yee, but it seems as though she's very misdirected, misinformed, and still trying to live under Nancy Reagan's just say no to drugs style of government. A style of government that doesn't work, it hasn't worked, it isn't working. And the war on drugs that we started by criminalizing cannabis in 1937 under the Cannabis Marijuana Tax Act, when Harry Anslinger lied to the U.S. Congress and said that this was a narcotic more dangerous than heroin and cocaine, which are only Class II felonies and only Class II narcotics under their classification system. And again, last year, the Supreme Court refused to hear a case concerning the classification of cannabis as a narcotic. And so indications are that the Supreme Court, stacked up by the Bush administration, both senior and junior, Shrubby and the old man, the conservatives on that court have been able to hold the rest of the country hostage to a policy that's failing, that has no sustainable long-term positive net effect, and is therefore not governance. It is an abuse of the power of the federal government, the largest, by the way, consumer of fossil fuels on Earth, and therefore one of the largest carbon contributors on Earth. Now, interestingly enough, if cannabis and hemp were legalized at the federal level like it is in Colorado and Washington, and like hemp is in 5 other states throughout the United States, you would begin producing crops that sequester 4 times more carbon out of the atmosphere than any other plant species on Earth. And this plant has a very specific purpose on this earth. Not just fibers, not just pharmaceuticals, not just high-strength plastics, but a lesson to all human beings that a little bit of inner reflection, whether it's induced by the smoking of cannabis or whether it's induced by fasting and meditating, studying yoga, the union of the body and the mind, or any combination of these things. Dr. Sisley, by the way, is interested in the effects of cannabinoids on post-traumatic stress disorder, which is suffered by many, many returning veterans who were sold a bill of goods and went off to become the liberators of Iraq. And we really had to stop all that yellow cake that they were buying and selling, aluminum tubes to process into nuclear fuel, which, of course, the whole thing turned out to be caca, because old big hat and no cattle, Shrubby Bush, was under the influence of the drugs of Dick Cheney, and would prefer to go to war and send young men to Iraq to die than to tell the truth about our dependency and our relationship with the oil companies, who had already mapped and divided the country of Iraq into their processing fields and their exploratory drill sites. So, besides that, Bush and Cheney had absolutely no plan and no way to pay for the war in Iraq. And so, to divert attention from the failing policies in Afghanistan, they pulled troops out of there to go fight in Iraq, because they said we would be the liberators from Saddam Hussein and that the people would welcome us in the streets. Well, once again, those oil company, energy company, Halliburton company contractors managed somehow to lose billions and billions and billions, big B, of dollars in Iraq. And it's still not a free country. It's in the throes of a continuous small civil war where this tribe hates that tribe, and they're taking retribution for the prior war where this tribe hated that tribe. And the whole thing's a mess because the British petroleum companies are the one who drew the maps at the end of the First World War and created chaos in that part of the world. Now, speaking of billions with the big B, you'll see behind me products that come from the Koch brothers, two multi-billionaires who want America to be the home of the Keystone XL pipeline so they can make 20 billion more profit. That's the big B. 20 billion profit from XL Keystone pipeline. The highest pressure, highest temperature operating pipeline ever proposed on the planet. And it traverses one of the most important aquifers in the United States, all the way through the breadbasket of America, the prairie lands. And just to be real sure they weren't going to get sued for any of that, they went and bought as many of the water rights as they could along the proposed pathways. And these products that you see behind me are only a small portion of what the Koch brothers own and what they produce in America. If you bought any kind of lumber products from Georgia Pacific, you put money into the pockets of multi-billionaires who are climate deniers and have spent more money rigging elections ever since the creation of the American Legislative Exchange Council, where they started by taking over school boards. And then they worked on city councils and county supervisors. And then they worked on legislators until they had in their pockets the legislation of most of the states in the United States where they wanted to conduct business and operate. And one of the things that they operate is labor in prison. They pay 20 cents an hour to people who are required by law to work 8 hours a day when they're in jail. And 40% of that gets taken back for room and board. And these are for-profit prisons like the ones run by Correctional Corporation of America, which has multiple facilities in the state of Arizona, and the governor of the state of Arizona is a shareholder. Last year alone, she spent $10 million of your tax dollars in Arizona housing prisoners in for-profit prisons to keep their 90% occupancy rate so they would be profitable. And the largest lobbying organizations that are stopping the legalization of cannabis and the establishment of both voting privileges and other civil rights of the cannabis criminals, who now number millions, 5.7 million voters in America would be eligible if the cannabis crime law were changed to reflect the truth. That if in fact Harry Anslinger in 1937 had told the truth to Congress, no one would have ever suffered the brutality of the war on drugs and the idiocy of just say no. And on a more local level, if in fact Pima County took its surplus real estate seriously and planted hemp in large quantities, they could offset their negative air impact upon this part of the country and become one of the largest carbon sequestering counties on earth. After all, Pima cotton is one of the longest fiber cottons on earth because of our sunshine, our relative humidity, our soil types. And I guarantee you that Pima County hemp would be longer fiber than most other hemp grown on earth because of our conditions here. So, I'm serious. It's time for truth and reconciliation. It is time to restore the rights of people who have been treated by the federal government to a lie since 1937. A lie, an absolute lie. A fabrication before a hearing of the Congress of the United States. Well, that was 1937. My mother was 17 when that law was passed. And as a child, she had already experienced alcohol prohibition and its effects on society and its eventual withdrawal from a prohibited substance. So, it's time for us to learn in this century that when you tell people a lie and they can fact check it, then you'll end up with states like Colorado and Washington where it's legal to have recreational cannabis, where it's legal to have medical cannabis, and where it's legal to tax cannabis. So you're seeing a change in the deficits of two states go to a very, very positive economic outcome. It's also legal now to grow and harvest hemp in the state of Colorado. They have the first legal crop harvested this year, and it is my hope that the rest of the states will take a note from Alec and step away from any relationship with the Koch brothers and their toxicity, their non-sustainable plan for becoming multi-billionaires instead of just multi-billionaires. So, there's a number of products that you need to know about, and because I can't read real well, I'm going to put on my glasses. There's called DMAC Up. There's Kitten Soft. There's Lotuses. There's Moltenel. There's Tenderly. There's Novell. There's OK. There's Cal Hogar. There's Delica. There's Inver Soft. There's Georgia Pacific. There's Vanity Fair. There's Angel Soft. There's Quilted Northern. There's Sparkle. There's Brawny. There's Mardi Gras. There's Dixie. There's Den's Armor Plus. There's Plintanium. There's Tough Rock. There's Investa. There's Lycra. There's Cool Max. There's Tactile. There's Solar Max. There's Polar Guard. There's Dacron. There's Thermolite. There's Comforel. There's Antron. There's Stain Master. And there's Core Dura. Every time you take money out of your wallet and you give it to the Koch brothers for one of these products, you can be guaranteed that someone in prison probably had their hands on your product at 20 cents an hour. And that in America, 4 out of 5 prisoners are persons of color, which shows the justice system is not based on justice, it's based on money. And that our legislature is now no longer based on the good of the country, it's based on money. When our legislators at the national level have had to admit that they now spend 70% of their time raising money and getting elected, that leaves them 30% of their time to do the job. We elected them through public elections and sent them to Washington, D.C. to represent our good qualities, to bring back to Arizona from the federal government truth and reconciliation, honesty, clarity, and good judgment. And if you look at the federal government of the United States today, you will see those areas lacking. The popularity of the Congress of the United States is at an all-time low. The people of the United States can no longer trust whether or not their telephone conversations, their mail, the possessions in their private homes and their vehicles are safe from government intervention, because the government has become so dependent upon its position as a fossil fuel consumer and as a regulator of everything. They're out of control. So you can't expect your legislatures at the national or the state level to be responsive to you when they spend more time raising money and getting elected than they do working. And when they retire, they get incredible benefits for life, for serving in a legislation where the majority are now millionaires. And so who are their clients? The lobbyists, the major corporations of America, the churches who pay no taxes, the National Football League, which is a non-profit, tax-exempt organization. So, it's kind of hard to understand this place. I'm glad that I've had the patience to take the time to check fact on everything that I've said to you, and to have the confidence that presented with the facts, legislatures like Senator Yee and the DEA will finally use the information that they squashed in all these studies that were done here in American universities that show that cannabinoid oil will kill all 3 known forms of breast cancer without collateral damage and without the rigor and shock to the body of chemotherapy and radiation. And if you only would apologize and serve all the women in this country who are going to be subject to breast cancer with a natural, organic treatment, then you can begin to build the trust of the American people and the rest of the world to whom you have lied since 1937 for fun and for profit. So, in conclusion, I'd like to ask each of you to write to your legislator and let them know that you know that the game is up, that they've been playing this game long enough, that the largest lobbies are the prison guards and the police unions, not the medicals, not the pharmaceuticals, not the tobacco companies, not the Koch brothers with all their billions. Okay? So, it's time for Rontime to come to a conclusion. Thank you for inviting me into your space. I really appreciate it. Give me your feedback. Have a nice day.